It's good to see everybody today. Everybody hear me okay? I can't tell with this thing. Hope everybody had a good 4th. I know we did. It's hot. We run down to Loudon and got some fireworks, and I knew we was at the right place when we was leaving, and the guy gave us a high 4. If you have your books, we're going to be on lesson number 6. I can control my tongue. And feel free, if you have that, if you want to jump ahead and grab a verse, or if you want to read out loud. And I'll probably be looking down a lot. I'm not a professional teacher. So if you have something to say, just interrupt. It's totally fine. So if you raise your hand, I may not see it. Lesson 6 is I can control my tongue. So I kind of renamed this to Kevin, you have a lot of work to do. Yes, I'm talking to you. So we've all done some things, ungodly, immoral things, like lying, stealing, sexual acts, gossip, slander, cursing, etc. Some have done all those things, some have done a few, but we've all fallen short at some point in some way. So how many of those come from the mouth, and how many of those may just be your internal dialogue? You may not even pass your lips, but you said it in your mind. So we'll look at number 1. Number 1 says, identify ways in which we need to control our tongue. I'm going to read these verses, or if somebody wants to grab one, and then we'll kind of talk about it after. And again, feel free to interrupt. I don't know how much material I got, so we may have a long break between services if I get excited and go fast. Proverbs 26:28. A lying tongue hates those who are crushed by it, and a flattering mouth works ruin. B, Proverbs 10:18. Whoever hides hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. Psalm 34:13. Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. C is 1 Peter 4:15. But let none of you suffer as a murderer, a thief, an evildoer, or a busybody in other people's matters. So I see here being nosy has the same warning as murder, stealing, and evil. That's an eye-opener. D, Colossians 3:8. But now you yourselves are put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. E, 2 Corinthians 12:20. For I fear lest when I come, I shall not find you such as I wish, and I shall be found by you as you do not wish, lest there be contentions, jealousies, outbursts of wrath, selfish ambitions, backbitings, whisperings, conceits, or tumults. F, Exodus 20 and verse 7. You shall not take the name of your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. G, Matthew 5:37. But let your yes be yes and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one. I can kind of hear my grandparents now with that one. Just do what you say you're going to do. I heard that a lot. So some of these, I don't think I ever thought about it in great regard, like hiding hatred is having lying lips. But if you do think about it, it does reflect dishonesty. And this is connected to spreading slander, so it kind of points out a two-faced person. Solomon describes the person who conceals his or her hatred of you to your face. They speak nice, kind, and flattering words, but then they express their hatred of you to other people. Also, saying nice words that we don't mean is lying, and acting dishonest toward a person is lying. So basically, you think a person is your friend based upon the conversations that you have, but little do you know the person that you think is your friend despises you and speaks bad about you behind your back. These are lying lips. Really, as Christians, we should say good things and we should mean them. Number 2, what is an unwholesome word? And that's Ephesians 4:29. Can somebody grab that one, please?
That which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers.
Thank you. So do you think that is a suggestion or a command? Yeah, command. So how much better off would we in the world be if all we said edifies or imparts grace? Number 3, what contributes to our losing control of our tongue? Proverbs 10:19, in the multitude of the world's sin is not lacking, but he who restrains his lips is wise. Remember that one. The call is to control the tongue. The more we talk, the more likely we're going to get ourselves in trouble. The more we talk, the more likely we're going to commit sin. Number 3b, James 1:19, so then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. Proverbs 29:20, do you see a man hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool than for him. 3c, Matthew 12:36, but I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give an account in the day of judgment. So that's a pretty scary verse to me. We got to give an account for what we've said. I can't even imagine that. So if it's like it is here on earth, you're going to be in front of a judge trying to remember things you probably don't remember, and that really is scary. So imagine that, standing before our Creator trying to say things that you might have said 20 years ago. Who knows? Number 4, what is God's expectation of the Christian? James 1:26, if anyone among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. So that's another scary verse. There's lots of scary verses in this lesson as we go down the line. Number 4b, 1 Peter 3:10, for he who would love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. And Proverbs 21:23, whoever guards his mouth and tongue keeps his soul from troubles. That's pretty sound advice. Solomon has described how the tongue causes strife and brings trouble, and he also reminds us to guard our mouth and we will keep ourselves out of trouble. So many of the troubles we encounter come from not controlling our tongue. We say things that we should not say, but we say it anyway. And half the time our words come back to haunt us here on earth. So just imagine on judgment. Harold.
A long time I had a thing on my desk that said, it's better to keep your mouth shut and appear stupid than to open it and move all out.
That's true. And there's a saying about two idiots are arguing, you can't pick out which one's which. You know, it's kind of the same thing.
And I'll tell you something else, you think, well, that ain't going to happen in the church. It happens all the time.
It does. And, you know, this is, it's funny how things line out, because this is probably one of my personal biggest struggles is the things that I pop off about. And just funny how the cards fall. The last time we picked lessons, I picked the lesson, and this time we picked the date, and I landed on this one.
I'm not excusing any, but it's just human nature to respond quickly. I think that's just
Oh,
what
sure.
most people are. Some are not made that way, but myself, big time made that way. And it's hard to change that in yourself, because my mouth is my biggest problem that I deal with daily.
Your sister's going,
We both got that thread. But, you know, just being able to think before you speak is very much a trained thing, and it's hard.
it is really hard, and and it's been forever. You know, we're going to talk about David some too. And, just some things that I didn't realize, and this is a side note. You know, I don't teach very often. I'm real thankful for the guys that do, but pick a lesson and come up here, because it forces you to do this and read commentaries and read sermons, and you know, it really you'll learn way more when you teach. But thanks. Anybody else got any comments? Yeah.
see this one listed, so if you're planning on getting to it later, I apologize.
Oh, it's okay. Jump ahead.
But in Luke 6:45, we're going to jump to the second part of the verse. It talks about out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's what I found when I have a particularly hard time with what's coming out of my mouth. It's usually because I'm speaking out of frustration, out of fear, or anger, or none of those things we're supposed to be focusing on to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And when I change my thought process, change where my heart's at towards those ends of all things good, all things noble, all things honorable, it's a lot easier to keep what's coming out of my mouth in a realm of appropriateness and being able to speak where I need to speak and shut up where I need to shut up.
Yeah, if we can center God, like really center God first, it's a lot easier to say better things. And then, you know, I have that same problem, and ego gets involved, especially at work, and, you know, just a bunch of shop talk, and, you know, it gets rough. But, you know, if we can just flip that switch every morning when we get up to be more God-centered, our mouths will reflect that. Yeah. Yeah.
What triggers losing control at home? And for the most part, it is not practicing restraint. You know, we're having this class this morning because we want to look into God's Word and see what it says about what we need to do. I think that's where we're lacking. We don't seek the wisdom of God through His Word.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good exercise for us to put those things in our mind today and use them for the rest of the week.
Mm-hmm.
So not practicing restraint. All these verses are telling us you got to practice restraint. You have to think before you say something. And like the gentleman said just a moment ago, whatever comes out of the mouth really shows who we are.
Yeah, and
We have to be careful. If
we're
we're trying to change internally, we need to put a zipper on it.
yeah, and we're going to get into the heart aspect of that for sure, because it's all connected. You know, we have to have the right heart, and you know, hopefully this somehow edifies you guys. But it certainly helped me, because it takes me forever to do these. So this has been on my mind for weeks. But you know, you can see as you study and you lay down, that's what's on your mind instead of whatever, marketplace or football or whatever. You know, just if you do a daily study, when you put your head on the pillow and when you wake up, this is kind of what's on your mind. Thank you, Lee. All right, here's a bit of a reading. So number 5 is read James 3, 1-12. So bear with me, please. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment. For we all stumble in many things. If anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle the whole body. Indeed, we put bits in horses' mouths, and they may obey us, and we turn their whole body. Look also at ships. Although they are so large and driven by fierce winds, they are turned by a very small rudder, wherever the pilot desires. Even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. All right. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. And the tongue is a fire, and a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body, and it sets fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast, bird, of reptile, and creature of the sea is tamed, and has been tamed by mankind. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our God and Father, and with it we curse men, who have been made in the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessings and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not be so. Does a spring send forth fresh water and bitter from the same opening? Can a fig tree, my brethren, bear olives, or a grapevine bear figs? Thus, no spring yields both salt water and fresh. Is there any comments for that reading? We're going to break that down a little. All right. So the first warning is kind of surprising. James says that we should not become teachers. So that seems a little weird to me. Why would James say Christians should rethink the idea of becoming teachers? He can't be saying that no one should be a teacher, because then there would be no one to preach the gospel. In fact, Paul said that God gave shepherds, evangelists, and teachers for the equipping of the saints. So obviously God wants teachers. I think we can guess that there were Christians who were saying, why don't I get my turn to be teacher? I should be a teacher. You guys know how we are. I think there were people then, just as there are today, who see teachers as having a glorious position and with the opportunity to stand in front of a group for personal glory.
To me, the warning about being a teacher is the fact that you, dealing with the tongue, you've got to be very careful about what you're teaching, and you better have it right, because then you're leading somebody astray if you're not teaching what is right. So if you're going to teach, you better be teaching from this, straight from this, not something else. So a lot of times, like I say, people have it in their head, oh, I know this or I know that, and I can teach, and they're not actually teaching correctly.
Mm.
So you do need to be very careful and make sure when you teach, we need teachers. When you teach, it has to be Bible and nothing else.
Yeah.
And I think it's also not teaching just in the classroom, because teachers, children especially, look up to children, look up to teachers.
Mm-hmm.
They become, their mentors. They just look up to them. So it's not just what we say in the classroom, but it's how we behave and what we say outside of the classroom. Sometimes, especially when it comes to the teenagers, or little children too, that can be just as important as what goes on inside the classroom.
Mm-hmm. I actually have a friend that is wayward now. Of course, I've not been a Christian super long, and he was raised that way. And part of his waywardness could have potentially been caused by a school teacher, by a Bible school teacher, that he heard a not great conversation from when he was 10 or 11 or 12. So, I mean, it does affect. And, that's...
It's real easy to let others down.
Yeah, and this lesson goes along those lines. That's a two-faced person. That's not she wasn't necessarily talking behind somebody's back, but you're one way in the classroom and you're another way somewhere else. Thank you. Yeah.
You mentioned, some people teach and speak just so that they can be heard and stuff. In Proverbs 16:18, it talks about pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. So, we're given warnings there about be careful about teaching, be careful about speaking, because if you're doing it for the wrong reason, first of all, you're going to fall.
Yeah, human nature gets us a lot. There's things I take pride in that maybe take it away from teaching, but I want my car shiny and stuff like that. That's a prideful thing. It's not necessarily the best. And I've certainly had teachers that were more arrogant than others, and you could tell that they were, that they were boastful about that. Their education might have been higher than their co-workers, or they kind of rubbed that stuff in. So, thank you, Gary. All right. So James begins with that warning that can be easily overlooked. So, do you also want to be judged more strictly? Are you prepared to be judged with a greater strictness? It's certainly true that teachers and preachers are judged by other Christians more strictly, but I don't think that's what James is talking about. He's definitely talking about God's judgment. So why will teachers be judged with a greater strictness? If we go back to verse 2, that sentence begins with the word for, showing us that James is trying to explain this teaching. The reason teachers will be judged with a stricter judgment is because we all stumble in many ways, and one of the ways we stumble is our words. And that's how true for myself. We all have many areas of weakness and points of falling short of God's desire and will, but one area in which we stumble is in what we say. It could be that teachers must talk more Therefore, teachers will be under stricter judgment because they've said many more words than those who don't teach. It's not that God is maybe judging teachers differently than other Christians. It's just that they speak more, and therefore there are more words to be judged by. Just a thought. So verse 2 also has James's attitude about the tongue. Anyone who does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man and able to bridle his own body. So that's telling me the person who can control the tongue is a complete mature Christian. His point is that controlling the tongue is difficult, and the person who can control the tongue is clearly a person who has developed spiritual control over it. James shows us that one of the principal marks of maturity is self-discipline. Self-discipline in regard to one's speech is rare. It is commanded, but James states how rare control is exercised. So we're going to do some comparisons. James does comparisons to the powerful tongue. This is going to be verses 3 to 5. He now explains why the tongue must be controlled. The tongue is a very important part of the body. James uses some illustrations to show what the tongue is like and why it must be controlled. And it's going to sound like I say the same thing different a few times, but it's the same thing over and over because this is for myself and I'm a little stubborn, so bear with me. The first comparison is that of a bit in a horse's mouth. Horses obey their riders because the bit is put in the horse's mouths, and the riders pull the reins so the bit moves the horse. The bit is what riders use to control the whole body. Simply, the bit controls the body of the horse. The second comparison is the rudder of a ship. Large ships are driven by strong waves and wind. However, though the ship is large and tossed by the winds, it has a very small rudder that guides the boat at the will of the captain. The second observation is similar to the first. The bit controls the whole body. The rudder controls the whole ship. So James implied that the rider of the horse has control over the animal, and now states the pilot of the ship has control over the large ship with a rudder. Both illustrations, someone has control over a whole body with something small. Yes, sir.
Now, like the tongue, you can talk a good thing, or you can even speak the truth. But people will listen to what you say, but the biggest thing is they're watching what you do. In other words, you teach this, but yet your lifestyle and your actions don't reflect what you teach. So you may teach something good, but it's like the greatest sermon is the one that's lived. That's the one people look at. You know, oh, he's a Sunday school teacher, but you see how he acts. And it might not be so much as the things that you say. It just may be your actions don't reflect your words.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that's.
Yeah, for sure. It's still back to the double-sided person. You know, you're saying one thing, doing another, or doing one thing, saying another, or saying one thing and saying another. You know, it's all about a hypocritical Christian. Thank you. The third illustration is how a small fire can set ablaze to a great forest. So we see this in California all the time. Someone lights a spark and millions of acres have burned up because of that. It was just a few years ago when they thought fires were going to go all the way to San Diego because they couldn't put them out. They were going to burn all the way to the ocean. So the fire illustration adds one more dimension to James's teaching. A small fire is a devastating and destructive thing. So also, the tongue is a small member, but it boasts great things. The tongue is this small member, but it gets us in a lot of trouble. So a modern comparison would be the tongue is like a steering wheel. I like cars, so the tongue controls where you go. The first important point James wants us to take away from the illustrations is that we can master our words. We can also master our lives. Winning the battle of the tongue goes a long way to winning our other battles. This requires a heart change, though. Jesus taught that from the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So I'm going to read Matthew, if y'all want to turn to Matthew 33. and I'm going to read 33 to 35. Those preachers are right. It's good to hear those Bibles turning from up here. It's kind of neat. Matthew 12:33. I'm sorry. Matthew 12:33. I forgot the 12. I just want to hear them flip some more. All right. Either make the tree good and its fruit good, or else make the tree bad and its fruit bad. For a tree is known by its fruit. Brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks. A good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth evil things. So we can't think that we simply can change our words and that will be the end of the story. So this isn't really like a fake it till you make it scenario. We must change our heart so that we can control the tongue, and by controlling the tongue, we will exercise a great mastery over other members like our whole body. Okay, James moved to a second point about why we need to control the tongue. The second reason is that the tongue, while small, has a very destructive power. The tongue is a fire with power to set fire to all our relationships. And the NET translation does a good job of this. It's back James 3, verse 6. I'll read it. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue represents the world of wrongdoing among the parts of our bodies. It pollutes the entire body and sets fire to the course of human existence and is set fire on hell. So it says the same thing, but that's a neat way to say it. All right, so not only does the tongue corrupt the whole person, but it also sets fire and wreaks havoc throughout one's life. Careless words destroy relationships and destroy lives. We hurt feelings and ruin relationships. We also hurt our own lives by our own tongues. We get ourselves in all sorts of trouble because we are not slow to speak. So James says that the tongue pollutes the entire body. We need to see our tongues are corrupting us. The words that we say corrupt our hearts. When we speak with filthy, crude language, we are corrupting our hearts and our thinking. So this has been James's point the whole time. The tongue controls the body. When our tongues are foul and filthy and are not godly and pure, then our bodies will follow along. When we gossip and speak malicious words, we become ugly people with dark hearts. When we slander people, we are exposing our cold hearts. Our words darken our hearts and unfortunately stain our souls. Our words change people. Our tongue set fire to the course of human existence. This cycle just keeps going and going from generation to generation. Our careless words and hurtful words are harming people and setting lives of others on fire and our own. If we go back to 7 and 8, there's some irony there. So humans have been able to tame all kinds of wild animals and birds, but why are we not taming our own tongues? The tongue is more difficult to tame than any of the wild animals. The tongue is restless and evil and full of deadly poison. It seems that the tongue is almost compared to a venomous viper. This thought leads to his final point why we must control our tongue. So these are the hypocritical and double-minded, and this will be verses 9 to 12. James 3, 9 to 12. Let's look how inconsistent we are with our tongues. With our tongues we bless the Lord, but then we curse people who are made in the very image and likeness of God. From the same mouth flows blessings and curses. How is this possible? Why do we do this? But it's most certainly what we do. One moment we can be saying beautiful, upbuilding words, and at the next moment tear a person down with our very own words. So I think there's some force in James's words, and I actually like the way it's translated too because it sounds a little country. But my brothers, these things ought not be so. He's like, this is just plain wrong. Stop doing it. This has a connection back to the double-minded person in James 1, verse 8. We're not fully dependent and loyal to Jesus, And we have not surrendered our tongue to Jesus. We have not decided to bridle our tongues. We just speak our minds, and we can't be God-focused and have a critical, filthy, or impure tongue. Our words of worship should condemn our conscience for all the things that we've used our mouths for this week, last week, whenever. And how is it that our mouths are praising God when we said bad things about other people yesterday or the day before or last week? How can our mouths claim Jesus to be Lord last week when last week we said all kinds of improper things? So would somebody read Ephesians 4:29, please?
Will corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but with what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers.
So again, is that a suggestion or a command? I mean, I'm going to take that as a command, and we fail at this. Awful. All right. We're going to look at James 3:11 to 12. Break it down. So verses 11 to 12 should drive a stake in our hearts. A spring cannot pour out fresh water and salt water. Also, a fig tree cannot bear olives. A grapevine cannot produce figs, and a salt pond cannot yield fresh water. So what do you think the point of all these examples are? Keep out the bad? Yeah. So a disciple cannot have a mouth that speaks curses, hurtful words, inconsiderate words, impure words, or words that do not build up. That implication is very clear. Springs do not produce fresh and salt water. Christians, true Christians, do not speak blessings and curses. Fig trees don't bear olives, and Christians do not allow their tongues to go unchecked or uncontrolled. So we need to see what the opponent is in our tongue. So we have to tame our tongue, and true Christians practice saving faith, control their tongues. The tongue can only be controlled with God's help, and we need a renewed heart to change our tongue and what we say and think. So watch out for our own inconsistent tongues. Try your best not to let it happen. Just don't be lax in controlling it. We have to realize the damage that our tongue causes. Yeah.
I know it's talking about something different there, but I think the principle still applies. In Revelation, you remember when he's writing to the Laodiceans, he said, I'd rather you be hot or cold.
Yeah.
But because you're neither, you're warm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth.
Yeah.
When I think of that, I think of when you're talking about the spring yielding both salt water and fresh, you can't be that.
Yeah.
You can't be hot or cold.
Well, yeah, cold and warm have the same outcome. So you have to be hot or not. It's just really only gives you one option. Any other comments?
Back in, sorry.
Go ahead.
So back in verse 6, it says that the tongue is set among our members as that which defiles the entire body. And how true can that be in the Lord's church? For somebody that can't control their tongue and actually says something, and can't take that back, how does that reflect in the body of Christ?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it not only affects our physical body or somebody else's physical body, it's going to affect the church body. You know, that's what the wildfire comparison is. It didn't say burn a tree up; it said burn the forest. So that's exactly what James is talking about. That it's setting the Christians, plural, on fire. Mm-hmm.
So say, with this group, they didn't have social media and the ability to instantly type a response. You know, that's also an extension of your tongue through your fingers.
Sure.
What you type. And all of us have probably seen that on whatever social media. You type a few simple words, you can light a fire, or you can put out a fire. That's a lot of times now that a lot of us communicating. That can be real dangerous. With a few words from your little phone, you can hurt a lot of people and make a lot of bad things happen.
Oh, you can. Well, I'm for sure guilty of that myself. So, you know, I'm the age where I watched the internet and email and all that come about as a young man that was not bridling his tongue. So there's no telling what I've typed out to people. Yes, sir.
Proverbs 18:21. The Bible says, life and death are in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof.
Mm.
So you do either one.
Yeah. You can do either. It's your choice.
My
But
mother always used to tell me, be careful what you speak.
mhm.
Watch what you say.
Yeah, my grandparents too. Yes, sir.
Specifically at this verse, we're seeing a lot of the fruit reflects the source. And going back to, again, that reflection on the heart and everything else, yeah, there's a lot of these external ways that we can use words, whether we speak, type in email, text, social media, everything else. What's that inner monologue?
Mm.
What are you telling yourself? And I might be bridling my tongue. I might not tell you what I'm thinking, looking at two-facedness again.
Mhm.
But am I finishing that thought differently in my head?
Mhm.
Am I going ahead and saying it in my head and then feeling justified in the fact that well, at least I didn't say it to them, at least I didn't put it out there,
Mhm.
so it's okay, it's not that bad? Or am I thinking about what I'm thinking about? Because yes, it talks about the tongue, yes, it talks about the words, and we often think of that as what is the outpouring. But the outpouring reflects what's going on inside.
Yeah.
And if I'm going ahead and allowing myself to have those thoughts and have those conversations in my head, then I'm just doing that two-facedness thing, and eventually what I'm thinking is going to slip out.
Mhm. Yeah, how many times have you typed something out, a message, and been like, oh man, I can't send that, and then delete the whole thing, and then maybe reword it 2 or 3 times, depending on what it is, but you still had it here. So that's where the study, we have to look at God's Word, and that's the only way we can truly change. But that's a start, my opinion, that's a start. If you are bridling your speech, that's the beginning. You got to start somewhere.
So going back to about the teachers, the part, if you think about it, right now, we're all sitting focused on what you're teaching.
Mhm.
Now, out in just the, real world, we may not even pay attention to what somebody else is saying, but we're all focused on you.
I wish you hadn't said that.
We're really watching you, making sure you're doing
I felt my face just turn red right there.
But it's, what you're doing right now, everybody's listening.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, talk about the tongue as a fire, the Gatlinburg fires, didn't it, I think they determined that it started with just a couple of kids messing around.
Yeah.
So you've got a match, and then it destroyed all the beauty and all the lives.
Yeah, homes and,
And, it all started with one
yeah.
really beautiful.
Yeah, and one word can do that. One word can affect a great number, not just a tree. Yeah, Harold.
We're going, even in here, you're going to have problems. You're not going to stop that. But we go about it the wrong way. If I've got a problem with you, I need to come to you. I don't need to be telling all these other people, you know what Kevin did with me? You need to look at me.
Yeah, I think there's advice for that in the Bible.
Me and you need to be thinking about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's probably way out of proportion that I didn't even realize. And me and you could solve it. Nobody else even knows anything about it.
Yeah, sure.
But we start gossiping and all of this stuff, and before you know it, it's church is split right down the middle.
Yeah, it can be. And unfortunately, Harold's saying that if you have a problem with somebody, that you got to take it up with that person and not gossip behind their back. But sometimes, especially 10 years ago, you grab somebody you don't like and you talk about them, it makes you feel good. And, it's just really a temptation and a habit that's bad. And it's, unfortunately, we could do that with our brethren here too. Really need to refrain from it and treat each other like Christians. We're brothers and sisters in Christ, and we need to act like it. Thanks. Thank you, Harold. Yeah.
I will be very brief. All of these are so intimidating and feel overwhelming because the judgment is so, God expects so much here, but we have positive imagery in Scripture when He says the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. It's no accident, I think, that it says the Word became flesh because He became flesh and changed the world and redeemed us. And so if we have that Word in our flesh and coming out of us,
So I don't know if I'm going to finish, but that's okay. So we will look at number 6b right quick. Matthew 16:24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. So let this statement, we've heard it a million times, let it sink in, please. So we have a real problem with this teaching sometimes, and how can we be told to deny ourselves? We should be able to do whatever we want. We should be able to think whatever we want, believe what we want, do what we want. We should be able to do whatever sounds good and feels good to us. We should never be uncomfortable or inconvenienced. And I would argue today that our culture says the true sin of the world is self-denial. And I think I've actually heard Eddie say that out loud. You should not have to deny yourself, and no one should ever tell you to deny yourself. This is the truth of the world. You should not deny doing what you feel. You should not deny doing what you think is right. You should not deny anything about who you are or what you want. And that's the unfortunate truth in today's culture. So, just...
we read about how Paul had to buffet himself. I mean, it's not just physical. It's mental, it's spiritual, it's every part of our being. And if we look at what all Christ went through there at the end, how he didn't want to, he didn't want to do what he had to do because he was a human, but he did what was right.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not my will, but thy will. And if we keep that in mind all the time, then we start changing what we're doing inside, even though the world's telling us, well, you should be told what to do. And even as a Christian, there's a lot of times you start feeling like, but if we just keep that in mind all the time, that even Paul and even Christ had to do what was right, even though it was going a little bit against what was human nature to them, that we still have to strive to do what is right.
So I'm going to close with this. Thank you, Debbie. So let the words of Jesus sink in. If you want to be disciples and if you want to follow him, you have to deny yourself. You have to. There's not only certain groups of people that have to deny themselves. Every person has desires that must be denied. Jesus denied himself and went to the cross, and we're told that we must deny ourselves and go to the cross. The cross becomes a symbol of total denial and a willingness to give ourselves and our lives completely for Jesus. So a big part of that denial is what we say. And I'll just close with, my grandparents also said, watch your mouth. So watch your mouth. I appreciate you guys.